Cobb is out. He retires at the end of the month. Emmett Flood is in. You might remember he represented Bill Clinton during his impeachment. Those changes come as former Trump attorney John Dowd reveals Mueller's team raised the prospect of issuing a grand jury subpoena to compel the president to testify under oath if he doesn't willingly sit down to talk. Current Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani says if there is a sit-down, there will be limits. He voiced concerns about the probe to White House correspondent John Roberts.
What I'm concerned about, because I know how when you're in the middle of an investigation you can lose some objectivity, is are they objective about the president's interview? Meaning, do they have an open mind to the fact that he may be telling the truth and Comey may be lying? If they have an open mind to that, then this is something we would consider. If they don't, then given all of the irregularities in this investigation, we would be foolish to have him be interviewed.
And here are some stipulations for an interview.
What to you would be acceptable parameters for an interview?
2 hours.
And topics?
Questions in advance. Relevant topics, meaning Russia, which may not be relevant any longer. And then we'd want a commitment for them that they're going to decide before the end of the summer, so we don't have this drag on and further imperil the presidency and the nation.
Mr. Trump firing off on Twitter once again, quote, "There was no collusion, it is a hoax, and there is no obstruction of justice. That is a setup, and that is a trap." All right, Kimberly.
Yeah.
Two things going on. We'll talk about the shakeup of the lawyers in a second. But in terms of this collision course, which it looks like we're on, we're either going to have this thing go all the way to the Supreme Court, or they're going to orchestrate some sort of controlled sit-down with Mueller, only 2 hours.
Yeah.
Do you think those are the stakes?
Yeah, you know, I think that this is actually really smart, and it's quite reasonable. Nobody wants to go all the way and take it, drag it out, et cetera, in terms of that. I think it's Rudy Giuliani is actually putting some really good parameters and limits on it to say we want to cooperate, we want to talk, let's sit down, let's limit the time scope, and let's have a discussion ahead of time, sort of where they're meeting of the minds in terms of how it should be conducted, and then the president will cooperate and answer the questions. Now, that sounds quite reasonable, right? That's not something that a tweet's being fired off or this or that or any kind of thing back and forth. They want to answer those questions, and I think it was particularly important what he said. Rudy Giuliani said as long as they have an open mind to be able to listen to the president, have already jumped to a foregone conclusion that Comey is telling the truth, that the president is not, then they're willing to sit down. If
How do they
that's the case,
determine
it's
whether
critical.
Mueller has an open mind?
Well, Mueller should then reply back, I have an open mind. I gave away the answers to the test.
Okay. So, Dana, Ty Cobb's out, and he, I think, worked for about a year for the president, and he got all of the documents over to Mueller, and he set up all the interviews. And now they're bringing in this impeachment lawyer that was working for Bill Clinton. What signal does that send to you?
Well, he didn't just work for Bill Clinton. I know Emmett Flood very well because he worked in the Bush White House as well.
Right.
He was the deputy to Fred Fielding. I know a lot about how Emmett thinks. He's got a very wonderful dry sense of humor. He's a very good lawyer. And we were having that U.S. attorney situation where the Democrats were demanding all of these documents from us. We were trying to produce them as fast as we could, and you could the same exact arguments that the Republicans are making today against the Justice Department for not releasing documents. It's the mirror image of what happened back in 2007 and 2008. So I think that Emmett is a much more assertive and aggressive type person. He knows special counsel law extremely well. I think there is a feeling that the original team was too accommodating to the Mueller investigation, and I don't know what this will change. But I think that when Rudy Giuliani says that this would be a 2-hour interview and we'll have to see in the narrow scope, I think that's probably what Emmett Flood talked to them about. Apparently, Jay Sekulow was the one who did a lot of the interviewing with Emmett to get to this point. But I also think that we kind of forget, it was about 5 weeks ago that Don McGahn, the president's White House counsel, said that he'd like to be gone by the summer, that he would stay till he found his replacement, and that could extend to the midterms. But Emmett Flood, I think, will end up being the White House counsel before the end of the summer.
All right. And, Greg, what we're hearing from the White House is, you know, I'm preparing to broker peace on the North Korea peninsula. I'm trying to negotiate something in Syria. I'm trying to deal with the Iranian nuclear situation. And now you're making me spend hours prepping for a sit-down and wasting my time on this.
Yeah, it's like studying for the SAT while you're trying to ride a bike. Anyway, we'll be right back. He should answer these questions on Twitter. That's what he should do. And I mean, I think 2 hours is way too long. I don't think he should have given him any time. Just do it in writing somehow. What bothers me most about this is that the investigation, the media, and the Democrats all appear to be working in tandem. It's like I said yesterday, it's like the Iran deal. The Democrats push the message, the media spreads the message, the investigation broadens. It's a self-perpetuating echo chamber. And what is the echo in that chamber? Unseat and impeach, instead of a countervision which requires ideas from Democrats provided to the media. They're relying on the ouster switch. We have to get rid of this guy, and this is the way to do it, which is disturbing. But to your point, we're in probably one of the most optimistic periods of recent history because we're watching the absence of ISIS videos. We're watching the absence of a North Korea nuclear threat. We're looking at a strong economy and declining crime overall, which is kind of interesting. So have they actually planned this out? They don't have to plan it out. They could just try to impeach the guy, but they should actually think about, in the long term, what does this mean to the country? What does it mean to half the country? What does it mean to the world? This is not just an attack on the United States. It's the world that's getting less violent. It's the world that's becoming safer because of a reduced North Korean threat and destruction of terrorist groups. It's about the world. Aren't we supposed to be thinking globally?
Yes.
Yes, Juan. Let's think globally.
Yes, think globally, Juan.
Think globally.
What do you think about all this?
Well, I think that, to me, it's a more aggressive phase. I think that's what Emmett Flood is. I think you're bringing in somebody who's a puncher and who knows how to fight. The thing is, I think it's Jay Sekulow who was taking the lead here in saying to Ty Cobb, I think that it's time to go. And I think you've seen the same thing with John Dowd. Both of them kind of were of a mind that said, the president, if you can talk, let's talk, but we don't think it's a great idea and we count you against it. The president wasn't listening. But after his lawyer, Michael Cohen's office was raided, I think the president has felt more defensive about giving the interview. And so now you're starting to see people who have gone from the litigation phase, I think, from the discovery phase, I should say, to litigation and now to confrontation. So the temperature has ramped up big time in the last few hours. And I think what's also contributed to the temperature rising is Rod Rosenstein over at Justice saying that you have people in the House who are trying to intimidate him and engaged in what he called extortion.
And we have some of that sound, so let's hear Rod Rosenstein in his own words.
Rod.
There have been people who have been making threats privately and publicly against me for quite some time. And I think they should understand by now the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted. We're going to do what's required by the rule of law, and any kind of threats that anybody makes are not going to affect the way we do our job.
So one of the reasons the House Oversight Committee is so frustrated with the Department of Justice, they've asked about Peter Strzok. They've asked about the Hillary investigation. They've asked about Uranium One. They've asked about FISA abuse. And they have been stonewalled for months and months and months and months and months by Rod Rosenstein and the FBI. And there's a real level of frustration that's reaching critical mass there.
Can I just interrupt for a second and say, wait a minute, Rod Rosenstein, not only did he help them justify firing Comey, he gave them the Comey memos that they requested. So what do you mean stonewall?
Well, they've asked about Peter Strzok and why he was fired and why it was 6 months before he was demoted, and that was hidden. They've asked about Uranium One, have gotten no answers. They've asked to see the dossier and the FISA application. What do you mean it's not to the topic?
This is in the weeds.
That's not in the weeds. That's what began a lot of these investigations.
No, I tell you what it is. It's an effort by Trump acolytes to try to undermine the standing of the Justice Department, the FBI, and that is a tragedy. Talk about thinking in the best interest of our country. That's not in the best interest.
Well, I would argue that, Juan, that if the Mueller investigation is looking at Russia collusion, he hasn't asked for a server from the DNC. He hasn't asked for Podesta's server. He hasn't asked anything about the payments made to Christopher Steele, and then those payments were hidden. So I think there's a lot of collusion on the other side. If he wants to look into that, he can, Kimberly.
Yeah, obviously there's some, frustration here. But I actually think that today, in terms of the comments by Rudy Giuliani, that there's a real, a sense of, calm and a practical approach. I mean, as a lawyer, former prosecutor, that's what you do. You say, okay, no problem, let's go over this. What is going to be good for you? And I think it makes the president look good to show that he has a reasonable person trying to, in fact, work and cooperate with the other side. Because the president's position has been, there is no collusion, and I did not obstruct, and I haven't done anything wrong. I'm frustrated by this. Okay, well, therefore, both sides are going to sit down and talk. You can't just put the President of the United States in with unfettered questions with no time frame or no, end game, et cetera. That would be ridiculous. No lawyer would do that. So Rudy Giuliani has a lot of experience in this. He has a team that he feels comfortable working with. That is also very important. And I think that this is a good sign. I think it's positive.
Do you think the president is confident enough in his own abilities, Dana, to think he could go toe-to-toe with Mueller for 2 to 3 to 4 hours and answer everything?
Well, I mean, they're trying to get into his mind to see what his intent was. I don't pretend to even be able to do that. But I would say I do think that the president does have should have some confidence in Rod Rosenstein, because what he was doing is saying, I'm sticking up for the executive branch and the Justice Department. And he's a good public servant, and the president chose a good person there, even though they might be frustrated that this investigation is going on. I think obviously Rod Rosenstein has the country's best interests in mind, and he has done well by the president doing the initial firing in the first place with the memo that he wrote. So I think that what's happening is our founding fathers knew about this a long time ago. We're going to have 3 branches of government, and they're equal branches, and they're going to have to fight it out. And that's what we just see this over and over again in every administration. It's actually quite comforting.
And they sure are fighting it out at every single level.
Yes.
Well, we know whose side the media is on. I think the public knows that this stinks, that this is ultimately going to be a huge waste of time. If you don't think the media is involved in this, Stormy's lawyer has been on CNN 60 times in 3 months. He's on the network more than James Earl Jones's Voice. They should change the name of CNN to the Playboy Channel.
Okay.
Before you go, let me just say one thing in terms of ratcheting it up.
Yes.
I think now we come down to the question, if the president's lawyers say no to the possibility of testifying, then the subpoena comes, and then you get to the point of it goes to the Supreme Court or the president pleading the fifth. And if that's the case, we are in, Greg, explosive territory.
You hope. You hope. You can still dream. You want the president to be impeached.
All right. And Rudy Giuliani is going to discuss all of this tonight on Hannity, 9 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss that. Ahead, many Democrats want her to step aside, but Nancy Pelosi has decided to snub them and gift Republicans instead. Right back.
Top House Democrat Nancy Pelosi appears to be giving Republicans a gift ahead of the midterm elections. The polarizing minority leader saying, quote, "We will win. I will run for Speaker, and I feel confident about it, and my members do too." Not all Democrats are agreeing with Pelosi. Some are saying she should step aside in favor of new party leadership. So that is the question. Greg, Nancy Pelosi has really been such a huge presence and force in the Democratic Party for so many years. She's one of their top, if not number one, fundraisers in terms of bringing donors together, party message, party direction, party leaders, people that are put in power or candidates that are favored. I mean, to be honest, she's quite formidable in terms of what she's done in the past. Now, it seems that people are wanting to go in a different direction. A lot of other candidates going to run. Well, what do you think is going to happen here?
So what you're saying is she's incompetent.
No, yeah.
If that's what you say.
Yeah.
2020 should be year of the woman. Pelosi should be Speaker. Hillary must run again. Debbie Wasserman Schultz should be Secretary of State. Though Secretary sounds kind of sexist. But I think that this is actually more proof that there's absolutely no new thinking in the Democratic Party. The ghosts of failure past still haunt their party because they don't have, every time Tom Perez, is that his name, opens his mouth, 100 Democrats leave the party. They become independent. And the reason why is you might be right. She might be the only effective person in that party right now that is left in tatters after Obama and Hillary. No one has a plan. The reason why they're doing so poorly with Trump is no one has a plan for immigration to counter any of what he's done with North Korea or ISIS. How can they prove that they can do better in any of these arenas without a plan? Their only plan is to go after the guy. The only plan they have is to wish Karl Marx a happy birthday.
Oh, my goodness.
Which is what the New York Times did.
All right, Dana, so this is pretty interesting because, there are plenty of Democrats that feel pretty bullish about the midterm elections, that they might have a good chance there. So she's saying, listen, we're going to try and deliver that vote. And for Nancy Pelosi, it's a matter of survival, right? Because she wants to continue in the leadership.
One thing that's interesting, where she gave this little talk, I think is important. It would have been just a local story, but now because everything is national, it becomes a national story. She was in Congressman Seth Moulton's backyard. He has been one of the guys that wanted to challenge her. So she's there in his local media and pushing back on that. But it does become this lightning rod, just like yesterday in the West Virginia debate that Brett Baer and Martha McCallum hosted last
Great job,
night.
by the way.
They asked, Brett Baer said, how many of you would vote for Mitch McConnell to be majority leader? They all refused to raise their hand. So going after the establishment incumbent is always going to play, but it only gets you so far. The Democrats have got to come up with some sort of proactive economic agenda, but I also think that Republicans are spending way too much time on defense and not thinking about a couple of things that are really on the minds of Americans. Healthcare in particular is still the #1 issue on the minds of the voters, and there's no one talking about that right now.
Okay, all right. So, Jesse, you know, the Republicans, the GOP are probably going, oh, okay, you know, rubbing their little hands together.
Yes, I mean, she's a great fundraiser for Democrats, but even a better fundraiser for Republicans.
Indeed.
She's toxic nationally. She's the queen of the swamp. But listen, having her be...
Well, the swamp is bipartisan now.
Listen, having her with the gavel is terrifying. Think about it. The whole agenda grinds to a halt. She controls the purse strings. That means you get no wall, probably not even any repairs on the wall. She controls the oversight, the investigations. There's going to be hearings galore. So it's a total nightmare. But this is not your typical Republican president, because he's probably going to want to work with Nancy if she's the House Speaker. He'll wheel and deal with crying Chuck, and that's going to make a lot of people angry on the right. You could get good things done. You could get bad things done. Who knows what's going to happen? But I don't think it's a done deal that the Democrats take the House, and here's why. They have the coalition in place, but I don't think the coalition's solidified. I think millennials' support for Democrats is down 10 points over the last year or so. Blacks don't usually turn out as much in the midterm elections. I think single white women, college educated, they're really going to turn out. I think Hispanics are going to turn out, but they're broke. The DNC has about $6 million cash on hand, $4 million in debt. The RNC has $40 million cash on hand. So there's a lot of wild cards, Mueller, North Korea, who knows what's going to happen. But if you get Republican candidates that support the Trump agenda, but are still kind of independent of Trump and will dismiss his style if it doesn't play in the district, I think they can do okay.
All right. So, Juan, tell us everything about the inside workings of the Democratic Party. I mean, you got great sources.
I tell you what struck me about this story was that Nancy Pelosi, in defending her leadership, said she doesn't want to leave because that would mean that there would be 5 white guys left at the table. She's talking about McConnell. Yep. She's talking about Ryan and the president and that crew. And that's not going to happen.
No, but she was talking about the Democrats, too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the leadership. Right,
but she said it would be Hoyer, Crowley, or Ryan, all white guys.
No, that's if they replaced her. But at the moment, you know, Hoyer's there at the table. Hoyer and her, McConnell and others. So that was her, I think, the strongest thing that she came out was saying you need a woman or someone's not a white male at the table. But
because white male, we're still evil, just so everybody knows.
No,
we're still evil.
Oh, evil. I think that plays to your sense that, white
no, she brought it up.
Under attack in America.
White men are bad.
Yeah, oh, that's right. I can see that they're really having trouble.
No, she's saying
But I think that what you have to understand is that if you ask Democrats about Pelosi, they are quite aware that Republicans relish the idea, because if you go back to Pennsylvania 18, Conor Lamb victory in a district that was run handily by President Trump, he disassociated. He said, I will not vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. He won. The question is going forward, how do Democrats handle this? Well, 2/3 of Democrats in polls like Nancy Pelosi, just like I think it's more than 2/3 of Republicans loathe Nancy Pelosi. So the question is, how do you deal with this? And at the moment,
well, they want
I would point
out.
to Paul Ryan, because I think Congress is not popular. Paul Ryan left.
He's still there. A lot of people want him to step down.
In Jersey this weekend, there was a local political ads I was watching during 60 Minutes, and they are all going after Paul Ryan as if they forgot that he actually...
But let's not forget, Juan just reminded me when you made that comment about white males, they're still dripping with identity politics in which they don't see people. They do not see individuals. They just see groups. And as long as they are part of that mindset, they are going to lose, and I hope they lose big, because it's time to favor the individual over the group.
You should tell that to President Trump when he's playing white identity politics. I would love to hear that.
I don't believe he does. Manufacturer proof.
Hey, all voices matter. Another politically correct makeover for the Boy Scouts, and we've got lots to say about it next week. Stay with us.
Boy Scouts.
Some days you're just breathing, just trying to break even.
The Boy Scouts caused a storm of controversy last year when it announced it would allow girls to join the ranks. Now another big change, a more gender-neutral name. They're dropping the boy part of the title of the flagship program for 11 to 17-year-olds. It'll simply be called Scouts BSA beginning next year. The parent organization will still remain the Boy Scouts of America. So they didn't quite go all the way there, Greg. They're like taking a little step back. Do you think this is them just trying to get ahead of what's going to happen in the future?
Well, I believe they have 3,000 girls, right, that are joining the Boy Scouts. So this is a wave of the future where a massive entity has to change because of a small percentage. We're seeing this in our culture everywhere. But what's good for the boys is going to be, I think, consequential to the girls, and I think primarily in women's sports. Because I think, you know, if you can decide who you are by how you identify as opposed to your biological status, which is happening now, women's sports has become more hormonally closer to the masculine makeup of a man. Do we just get rid of distinctions completely? Like, if it's going to be hard for women to compete against transgendered individuals, and that's where I think this kind of like is going. And what other distinctions can you blur? For example, why does it have to be boys and girls? Why can't men and women join the Scouts? Isn't that age discrimination? Can a 53-year-old man who identifies as a 16-year-old girl join the Scouts? Or the Girl Scouts?
Would you like us to get back to you on that?
There's actually
they have
a guy who
identifies
as that. So you think it's absurd. It's not.
It does sound absurd. I guess it is a lot. There's a lot of absurdity happening.
Thank you.
Juan, I wanted to ask you, especially when it comes to boys' education, have we taken so much away from boys that this seems unnecessary?
What do you mean?
Well, I feel like there's so much attention on, and I'm for it, like my Minute Mentoring program, all that for young women and for girls and for building their confidence. But has it come at the expense of attention for boys?
This is really interesting because I think oftentimes these days boys are without fathers. We see an increase in terms of fatherless children, and it's heavily in the black community, heavily Hispanic community, but it's also now, I think, more than a third of the white children. So when you ask me that question, it does touch a nerve because I think you need role models and you need a sense of an older male talking to a younger male about behavior and standards and how you deal with women, for example. But, you know, actually, when I heard this story, I was concerned more about, you know, my granddaughters or girls losing their space. Because I know, like, for example, I went to an all-male college. We had an all-female college next door. This is Haverford and Bryn Mawr. And Haverford went co-ed subsequently. No problem. Bryn Mawr, though, never went co-ed. And you notice the Seven Sisters, they don't go co-ed. It's all the boys' schools that went co-ed. And I think, you know, you'd ask why they don't go co-ed, because the girls have their space. They don't have to always be dealing with men in a male-dominated environment. We live in a male-dominated culture. So here's an opportunity for women to talk about sexual harassment. How do you make progress in the workplace? How do you deal with your own physical self as a woman without having men in your presence at all the time?
Well, I might have gotten too deep on this. Is it just a name change, Jesse, or is this a signal of something else?
I don't know. I'm worried about the cookies, Dana. Do the cookies survive this merger? That's something that's really on the top of my mind.
Probably is.
We're going to do some research on that, maybe have an update tomorrow. Yeah, in the OMT. I think, to Greg's point, maybe the NBA should get ahead of things. We merge the WNBA with the NBA. You know, you don't want any discrimination there. And I agree with Juan. Listen, girls need their space, boys need their space. Have a mixer. You know, you have the Boy Scouts, you have the Girl Scouts. If they want to do stuff together, that's fine. When we were researching this, it didn't seem like a lot of people on the girls' side or the boys' side were that thrilled about it. So I don't even know why this is happening.
Because the Girl Scouts sort of like, well, wait, what are you doing here? Right, what are you doing here?
We want to hang with you gross boys.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you know, people have to be able to assimilate, to want to have to go to their groups and things like that. I remember I was in law school. I was like in Latin Spice Club, and then I was in the Women's Law Club, and Irish, but we'd have mixers, right? So sometimes you want to just say, hang out, that's fine. Dana and I were both campfire girls, bluebirds, in fact.
So was I.
The
Bluebird pledge.
Do you guys know how to build a campfire? Did you remember that?
Yeah, you go on sleepovers and you learned how to do that, and arts and crafts teach you a lot about
I doubt you two could build a campfire in the wilderness right now.
Okay.
Challenge accepted. Challenge accepted.
Yeah.
And we will be going out to the...
She grew up on a ranch, Jesse.
Yeah,
That's true.
I grew up living in a farm every summer in Ireland. Okay, so let me tell you something.
I'll race you.
Jesse, I think you might be the
Campfire
odd one
building
out
off.
there. Yeah.
Fine, all right.
But I think girls now can be Eagle Scouts. That's different.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
And they didn't change the name of the eagle. All right, just kidding. I had a case for legalizing a highly illegal drug with medical benefits perhaps greater than marijuana. Right back.
According to a new study, soldiers with PTSD using the illegal drug known as MDMA or ecstasy cured the condition within weeks. This is key because I don't think I've ever seen the word cured in a highfalutin medical journal. Usually it's significantly improves, but never cures. Now, the study was small, 26 patients, but the message is big. When a substance has a real effect, meaning it changes you, it also frightens people. Drugs like ecstasy are illegal because they work. And when things work, they are hijacked for other purposes, to have fun, for example, and then people die from taking too much. And that's when the law breaks in and bans it. This has happened to many substances that could have helped millions of people. Just decades ago, MDMA showed real promise in psychotherapy. Then it got banned. But times are changing. We realize it's absurd to punish a substance and a patient because the substance has potential for abuse. Instead, let scientists test them on various hard-to-treat illnesses. You want a crazy example? Try botulinum toxin. It's a substance that's deadly. Yet instead of reporting its lethality, newscasters shoot it into their faces because it reduces wrinkles when used wisely. It's poison! Other drugs like Special K are now being tested on depression. Pot's also being tried on PTSD as well. So with scientific study comes progress and relief. So why not send a drug down that path instead of leaving it on the street? All right, you know what I think is smart, Dana? If you look at a lot of these studies, it's the choice of the patient. If you use veterans, people have an innate sense, Democrats and Republicans, that we owe it to them.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's a great strategy. Like if you just did, this is a study of depressed IT workers. People are going to go, it's too bad.
No, because also we have thankfully learned enough about PTS that
your computer's never getting fixed.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, IT workers.
I think we've learned enough about PTS to understand just how damaging it is to somebody and how the terror, especially also the suicides.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I agree with this. One thing I think that could happen because of this study and the concern about it being misused and abused is the possibility of new delivery devices. So, for example, if you find out that it's something that works for a patient with PTSD, a veteran, is there something like an implant?
Yeah.
Something that where the doctor is in charge of it, and it's not something that's like handing pills out on the street.
Right.
And there's a lot of new innovations like that happening. And Scott Gottlieb, who is the FDA commissioner under President Trump, he's really forward-thinking in this regard, so it's possible that something could actually happen.
I hope so. Juan, they're looking at all sorts of drugs that we've always been taught in the 70s, like when we used to watch Dragnet. Remember, every drug was bad, acid, but now they're looking at these things because they see they have potential for many illnesses.
Yeah, I mean, marijuana is at the cutting edge of this, and it's again, it's older people who find it's good for pain relief, relaxation, and I think it's lots of people who are voters. And so I think you're seeing the country change on marijuana in a radical way in our lifetime.
While they're voting?
I don't know.
That explains a lot.
It explains November 2016.
Okay.
But that explains why people are smoking more pot.
But you know what struck me was I thought when I first read this, I think, oh boy, this is not, you know what, this is like some big pharmaceutical companies come up to, and I get through the story and says, no, not at all. This is Association for Psychedelic Studies, which was created in 1986 after MDMA or ecstasy had been banned.
Exactly.
So I don't know. So then I thought, well, so were these people supporters of ecstasy? Is that why they were created?
I think that there was a group of psychotherapists who were really, really angry when a valuable tool was taken from them. And I can't remember the guy who's in charge, Dubrin, I think, or Dubler, I can't think of the guy's name, but he's been pioneering all of this. And but that's how it happened. They were ticked off that the government stepped in. And
but you know, it's interesting to me that, you know, previously most conservatives would have said, oh no,
absolutely,
oh no, no, no. But now, given the veterans' needs, and because it's a crisis for the veterans, all of a sudden the conservatives are like, oh yeah, what? Let's try that.
I think that was the key. I think, Kimberly. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that, you know, this is part of the overall, you know, complex problem that we have facing veterans, those that are coming home, so many more of them surviving injuries that otherwise that would have been life-threatening or ending. In TBI, traumatic brain injury, the depression, anxiety, the homelessness, the things that come with serving, being away, families broken up. It's very difficult, but I think there is definitely a genuine interest in trying to do the best for our men and women that serve, and part of that would be allowing them maybe exposure to some other different types of remedies or drugs or therapies that might be beneficial to them. So many of them can seek, you know, the help of the VA as a, you know, a last resort, and I think that's why we really need to do something about it and put in somebody very strong and great there to do a wonderful job for the veterans and really help them.
You know, Jess, did you ever think you'd be doing a pro-ecstasy segment on Fox News?
No, my mind's spinning right now, and I haven't taken any ecstasy. LSD was used in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s in small clinical trials to treat alcoholism and PTSD and depression. And then it was banned because people would abuse it, and now it's getting a second look because of this. The brain scanning imagery is so much more detailed. You can see if it's MDMA or a small dosage of LSD, what effect that has on the brain, and it gives the scientists and the medical professionals a more accurate read on what it's actually accomplishing. I think every option should be on the table. If it's a therapy dog, if it's psychotherapy, hyperbaric chambers, medical marijuana, MDMA, let's get it all fixed, and something that's taboo shouldn't prevent doctors from trying to help
I be the
with radical
conservative on
therapies.
this, though? I just don't
Whoa,
want...
this is getting weird.
I know, but I just don't want... Ecstasy can kill young people. They go to these parties, these raves, and
but
you hear
small
somebody's
dose in a
daughter...
clinical trial, it's
You know,
controlled.
be careful.